In today's video, we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series. We're now at the 17th ranked team from the regular season, the Montreal Canadiens. The Habs certainly, I think fair to say, had a bit of a surprise season getting into the playoffs with the final wildcard spot. How can they build upon that? What should we expect of them when it comes to the 2025 NHL Draft, free agency, trades, of course, their own internal business? What will they do this summer? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the 17th ranked team from the regular season, the Montreal Canadiens. In case you're new to this series, essentially every team in the NHL will have its own dedicated video. We started with the last ranked 32nd team and are working our way up all the way to number 1. So right now we're almost halfway through the league. Team 17, the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to recap last year, take a look at some key team and individual stats, analyze how things went, and then we're going to dive into the plan for next year. We'll analyze their internal business, restricted and unrestricted free agents. What will we expect at the draft, free agency, trades, and kind of outline what we feel their main areas of focus should be as they get into the full swing of the offseason here. So let's first start by recapping last year, the 24-25 season. As I mentioned, it was a pretty successful one. It took a big jump forward in the standings. They squeezed into the last playoff spot, took them right to the very end to do it. But hey, they don't really care too much about that. The team and the fans were utterly excited, and really understandably so. I don't think a lot of people, at least if you're being real and realistic, expected Montreal to make the playoffs this year. I know when we did our predictions before the season, which I always do, I did expect Montreal to be better than they were last year. I did expect them to probably move up some. I didn't think they'd go all the way to the playoffs. I thought we would see, because I predicted teams like Ottawa and Buffalo should be further ahead and get into the playoffs first. Well, that didn't happen. I even thought Detroit would probably have a better chance than Montreal, considering that Detroit was only right there last year and lost out on a tiebreaker. But ultimately, Ottawa did get in, and that one I was accurate on, but Montreal jumped ahead of Buffalo and Detroit, which for those teams, they've got to be frustrated by that. They've been rebuilding longer and have been out of the playoffs longer, and then here comes Montreal turning things around faster. So that's going to make things even more interesting and tough on those teams below them next year. But Montreal finished with a record of 40, 31, and 11 for 91 points. They played a lot of overtime during the regular season. Those extra points really add up, and really, if you think about how their record was and how they squeaked into the playoffs, certainly helped them for sure. That is a big jump over last year. That's a 15-point game. Last year, they only had 76 points, only had 30 wins. So they won 10 more hockey games than they did the previous season. That's a big jump. Now, last year, they had even more overtime losses with 16. Pretty crazy. So clearly, this team seems to be in a lot of close games and have played a ton of overtime in the last couple of years during the regular season. Now, this year, they were the 17th highest scoring team, 243 goals. It's a small jump from last year where they scored 236. So 7 goals more, 17th in the league. That's pretty right around average. It's respectable. It's fine. Goals against, they allowed 261, which was 10th best. That is a nice improvement. The year before, they allowed 289. So they cut down on their goals against by 28 goals, and they scored 7 more. Overall, I think that's a pretty decent swing. The power play wasn't phenomenal, but it was productive, 20.1%, 21st in the league. There was a point in time, a number of years back, when 20% on a power play was actually considered really good. Now it's below average. It's kind of hard to believe how things have changed in the last number of years, especially 4 or 5 years here. The penalty killing was above average too, 80.9% for 9th best. So, typically to have a lot of success in the playoffs, you usually see teams that are top 10 specialty teams. So they do have part of that there. Goaltending was a part of what they're going to saw an improvement on as well, which is what we'll discuss here in a minute. But overall, lots to be happy about. Breaking down some individual stuff, looking at the goalies, Samuel Montembeault came into the season as the clear number 1. Started the year with Primo as his backup, and with the hope that Primo could take a step here, at the very least be a reliable backup, maybe a 1B. If you want to split the starts a little bit more, if he can earn more of them. Of course, they moved on from Jake Allen at the previous year's trade deadline. And I think they might have some regrets now, to be honest. At least they did early on. Montembeault, though, was good. He finished with a record of 31, 24, and 7, 2.82 goals against, 902 save percentage. Had a good start to the year. Got to be on the four-nation team for Team Canada. Was the number 3 goaltender. Unfortunately, didn't see the ice, but good experience being there and being all around all those top players. He'll be in the conversation again, I'm sure, when it comes to next year's Olympic team. The players that were on that four-nation team will probably, to some degree, have a leg up, but obviously their early season play will definitely play a big role. And I think we saw with the goalies that were selected by Team Canada, I found some of them had better first halves, and after they were selected and after the tournament, some of their numbers kind of dipped a bit, whereas some of the guys that weren't picked seemed to kind of take off. So it's going to be interesting to see, because it's not the biggest area of strength for Canada at the international level, for sure. So Primo, early on, kind of didn't do very well and became a player that I think the coaching staff lost faith and trust in. He only had a 2-3-1 record, 4.7 goals against, and an 836 save percentage. So he went on waivers and went down to the American League. Nobody picked him up, of course, and his actually time in Laval has actually been pretty good. His numbers down there are fine, but the problem is he's got lots of experience at that level. They need him to take the next step and get the good numbers at the higher level. And I don't know what's going to happen with Primo. You have to think his time in Montreal very well might be coming to an end here. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Dobish ended up coming up to replace him and did a better job. I think Dobish was hot early on, and then teams started to figure out how to beat him and some of his weaknesses. So then he kind of became... There was a point to it, I think, where the coaching staff was starting to feel like maybe we can't trust him, and they played Montembeault a lot. And I really wondered if they were going to cause Montembeault to kind of run out of gas. If they were going to get in the playoffs, was he going to be exhausted? But Dobish had a 7-4-3 record, a 2.74 goals against, and a 909 save percentage. So his numbers actually ended up being better in a sense than Montembeault, but a much smaller sample size. So it's not really fair to say he had a better season, because he really did. And Montembeault was the backbone and the heartbeat of that team. Individually, scoring leaders include Nick Suzuki, the captain, having another career season at 89 points. Cole Caulfield was able to stay healthier. I know he's missed a lot of time over his career. 70 points for him. Breakout rookie sensation Lane Hudson with 66. Slavkovsky is the fourth highest scorer at 51, which for him, and based on what he's done before, I think it's fair to say that was a little bit disappointing. Slavkovsky being the first overall pick and with the contract they gave him. And he even said earlier this year, Slavkovsky said, which I know, not sure how different people felt about it, but he said he was trying to model his game after Brady Tkachuk. And I know Ottawa and Montreal are big rivals. Obviously, they were two teams kind of going back and forth for the playoff spots. They both made it in. As I was saying, the last probably 2 months of the season, I think there's room for both of these teams to kind of make that jump, and they did. And Slavkovsky is built the same as Brady. I don't know if he can be exactly like him, but certainly not a bad player to model yourself after. But for Slavkovsky, it seems to be a consistency thing. Now, of course, late in the season, we saw them bring over what they feel is a phenom in Ivan Demidov. Of course, they call him the demigod. The fan base is absolutely just in love with this guy and going crazy. His first game was phenomenal. I remember watching it. It was an Amazon Prime game. They were in the Bell Center, and he had a goal and an assist and had a great first period. But then after that, things kind of, he only played a handful of regular season games, but it did kind of cool off. He had his moments, like looked brilliant at times, but still kind of feeling things out. I just don't want to see the fan base or the team for that matter put too much pressure on Demidov, and see where things go. They also signed Jake Evans to a longer term extension. There was a lot of rumors, you could say, around him and his future leading into the trade deadline, whether or not he was going to sign or end up being traded, and things were trending towards a trade. Jake Evans, I believe, was even prepared for it. I think he was even getting ready to move and all that, and boom, an extension came together. So he's going to end up staying. Now, looking at the expectations for this team in the offseason, we're going to start with their internal business. But looking at their cap space, they only have $6.1 million, and the reason for that is because for right now in the offseason, they have to count the Carey Price contract in there. So clearly, Carey Price is still under contract. They can go the LTIR route with that $10 million if they need to again, which at this point, you kind of need to, or, figure out a way to move that. So, they can theoretically have about $16 million in cap space, depending on how you go about things. And we'll get into the Carey Price thing here momentarily as well, and the questions of the teams facing this offseason. Looking at their internal business first. So we're going to look at their expiring contracts and players that either need to be re-signed or replaced. On the RFA side, they've only got 3. None of these are going to be overly expensive, but they get Emil Heineman, Jaden Struble, and goalie Jacob Dobush. As I mentioned, I suspect that the team would be interested in retaining all 3 so they can offer qualifying offers and then get deals done. Like I said, I don't know anybody's getting a longer-term deal, and I don't think anybody's getting anything overly expensive. So you're probably looking at 1 or 2 year deals for all players in the lower-end range of things. On the UFA side, you've got Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia, David Savard, and Michael Pezzetta. Now, we know Savard's already announced his retirement, so he's not returning. So the right shot defenseman, who's been a pretty good mentor for the young guys and blocked a ton of shots, is no longer going to be with them on the ice, but there is some speculation that he's interested in sticking around and being a mentor in other ways, and that he may end up taking a role or a job off the ice with the Montreal Canadiens in a different capacity. Maybe it's some player development or something along those lines, because it sounded like his main interest was to kind of help some of the younger defensemen continue to develop. So we'll see if things work out that way. As far as the UFA goes, Dvorak, Armia, Pezzetta, would it be surprising if none of those players returned? No, it wouldn't. And to be fair, I will say that as much as Dvorak's time in Montreal overall hasn't been great, I think there were times, especially probably the second half of this year and a little bit in the playoffs, where he actually had better play. He was being relied upon for faceoffs. He actually did okay with that veteran line to put together when he was playing a lot with Anderson and Gallagher. Didn't look too bad. I'm not sure that they bring him back because he's probably going to have an opportunity to get a little bit more term and a little bit more money somewhere else. Obviously, his career hasn't quite taken off to the level that they were hoping for. When they traded for him, I think they had hoped that he would be the number 2 center, and that never really worked out. They've struggled with that spot for a long time, so it's possible that none of those guys are back unless they're willing to take really cheap contracts. So there's just not a lot of room. There is a bunch of players that are eligible for contract extensions. We may see some of this, the main one being Lane Hudson. The Montreal Canadiens are probably going to want to get ahead of this. If they wait, it's probably only going to get more expensive, but Lane Hudson's got a say in all this as well. Obviously, he'll have a big decision to make if he wants to sign this offseason and take a big long-term deal, because I'm sure that's what Montreal would prefer. Or does he want to wait? And, he's going to be restricted, so it's not a big deal. Obviously, you have to worry to some degree about offer sheets, but, when the player's really happy and wants to stay, you don't worry about that quite as much. But Lane Hudson is, obviously put up a lot of points. He's in conversation for Rookie of the Year, Calder finalist, very well could be the Calder winner. And if I'm Montreal, I want to get that done. So look for a Lane Hudson extension. I think the odds are favorable that Montreal and Hudson come to terms sometime here after July 1st. There's Patrick Laine is eligible, Kirby Dach, Joshua Waugh, Arbor Jacki, and Logan Mailloux. I'm not sure that we see them rush into any of these other deals. Dach, because of his injury history, I'm going to say they probably wait on that. There's no point. Jacki and Mailloux would be restricted as well, and I think they're probably not quite sure exactly where they're going to fit long term just yet, so there's no need to rush that. Same with Joshua Waugh. Let him develop one more year. See, is there any chance he makes the roster at a training camp? I think it's a big year for Waugh. He either makes this roster, or if he doesn't, you might as well trade him, because he's kind of getting to the point in his development as a prospect that he's an older prospect now. It's kind of a sink or swim type of scenario. In Laine, we're going to talk about his future here as well. Again, you had a decent sample size where he was scoring good, but at the same time, there was other, I think, little parts of his game that can be frustrating here as well. So looking at now the top questions facing this franchise, we're going to now explore, what we expect from them when it comes to trades, the draft, and free agency, and things of that nature. So to me, the biggest question is, can they find themselves a number 2 center? This has been a struggle for this team for a while. And it's remarkable. And I know a lot of people, especially, fans of teams that are the rivals of the Canadiens, like to obviously, pick out their top guys a lot because this is part of chirping, I guess. But Suzuki, what Nick Suzuki has done as a number one center, and you can say what you want about, his numbers, and maybe he's a number two center on some teams, and maybe that's the case. But if he's a number two center, then it's a really, really good team. That means you're that much deeper, right? But the thing here is that he has done what he's done without having that insulation behind him. He's still getting a lot of the tough matchups. So I think if you can get a proper number two center and have a second line that's a little bit more of a threat and consistently going to cause other teams to go, ooh, maybe we should focus on them tonight, you're going to give those other guys more opportunities to get away from some of those matchups, and you can probably expect more productivity as well. So again, that's been, like, they brought in Kirby Dach. It didn't work out. Before that, they traded for Dvorak. Hasn't worked out. They brought in Alex Newhook. That hasn't worked out. Now, Newhook probably has a role in this team, but it's not going to be as high in the lineup as they had hoped when they brought him in. Dach, I don't think they see him as a center. If he's able to stay healthy and productive, I think his only shot to staying with this team and working out longer term is to be a winger. And I'm not really sure exactly how that's going to work out for him. I wouldn't completely rule out a possibility that Dach is a trade piece this summer, but given his injury history, that's probably going to be tough to do. I'm not sure if another team's going to take a chance on him here just yet. But the number two center spot is going to be crucial for them to get figured out. We've heard a number of names out there. We've heard about should they offer sheet or trade for Mason McTavish. Well, great thought, but I don't know what the Anaheim Ducks want to give him up. He was drafted third overall. He's only been in the league a couple years. He's still growing. He's nowhere near his peak. And I don't see the Ducks wanting to get rid of him. I think they'd be crazy to be honest. Now, Trevor Zegras might be more likely, but after a couple of down years of Trevor Zegras, is that really going to be the guy you want? I mean, I know he's got the relationship with Caulfield. He is very talented, but he's struggled to put it together. Consistency, he's had a lot of injuries. I think getting Zegras to me seems risky. I really like the player, and if they want to try to get him on a discounted type of trade, which I don't see Pat Verbeek wanting to do either, but given they have the fact that they've really emphasized in Anaheim about going for the playoffs this year, they hired Joe Quenneville, they made some changes there. I won't be shocked if he's moved. I don't know that he's really the best fit for Montreal. But last year at the draft, they did have a trade lined up for Trevor Zegras, but it was contingent on Ivan Demidov not being available to them at the draft. So if Demidov would have went higher and he wouldn't have been available, Montreal was going to include their first round pick to the Ducks, and I don't know the exact package, but there was a line, it was all lined up to go to Anaheim for Zegras. It never ended up going down. So we'll see if they revisit, but not so sure. Marco Rossi's name has been out there as well, productive guy in Minnesota. Minnesota seems to want to get a different kind of player in there. They're not keen on giving him a long-term contract that he's earned here with some strong production. Again, I like Rossi. My only concern is Montreal does have a lot of smaller-ish forwards, and do they want another one? At the same time, though, they do have some big bodies mixed in there. Like Slavkovsky obviously has good size. Demidov coming in. Demidov's, I don't really know what to call him. He's not short, but he's not like a big power forward either, right? He's a little bit, decent height, but a little more wiry, if you will. We'll have to see. I'm not sure how much physicality he's going to have to his game. So you want to be careful. You need a mix in that top six. You got Caulfield and Suzuki, who are not big guys either. So, that's the question right there is, do you want another top six that's a little bit on the smaller side? Like you got Josh Anderson, but he's playing lower in the lineup. Where does this all fit? So I like Rossi as a player, just not sure. And those are the main names we've kind of heard out there, but I think they need to look into some other options and see what they can find. But getting a number two center is definitely the biggest priority. I do wonder about goaltending. I do wonder if Primo's time in Montreal has come to an end. Obviously, they're still going in the AHL playoffs, and he's kind of showing that he could be valuable. But, maybe that's more of a opportunity for them to showcase him to other teams. Obviously, Primo has had, I think, a big enough sample opportunity at the NHL and hasn't quite gotten it done yet. So I won't be shocked if he if they move on from him. Is Dobush going to be a full-time backup? Or is it maybe better for him to be in the American Hockey League? Now, they have also got Jacob Fowler, who came out of college as a top draft pick prospect and has done well in his brief amount of time down there too. So do they go with a Fowler-Dobush tandem and bring in like a veteran on a short-term stopgap type of contract just to allow the NHL team to make sure they've got good, stable goaltending while taking the pressure off the kids? Or do they go with Dobush as a backup, let Fowler have full reign as a starter, play a ton of games down there, and insulate him with another body? I'm not sure what the best plan is. To be honest, if they could bring back Jake Allen. I mean, I know maybe this is just me being a little biased for, obviously Jake and I share a hometown, so I've got to know the family a little bit, but like, I think he could be a good fit for them. He really liked it there. I don't think he really wanted to leave. They had to ask him numerous times to waive his no trade to go to New Jersey. Even if it's a 1-year deal, I don't know if he takes that, given Jake's age. Maybe he wants one more multi-year contract. I don't know. I think he wants to play at least a couple more years from what I've heard. But, he's probably not going back to New Jersey. That's probably a fair statement at this point. At least the expectation is. So do they bring in a vet like that for a year and say, okay, Dobush and Fowler are they're gonna run the AHL team, and we want to have a lot of success down there. They can kind of split the starts, or what do they do? That's a question that they need to answer. And they could go with Montemo and Dobush. If for any reason Dobush isn't working out, that maybe because it's common for young goalies to have hot streaks and then kind of highs and lows early on, and they could always go out and try to add a veteran throughout the year if they think they need it. Hard to say how they go about it because they only have a limited amount of space here. But speaking of goaltending, do they trade Carey Price? That's another big question. A lot of people have wondered, well, why would they do that? Well, you could either trade him and free up the cap space, right? Maybe there's another team that needs to get to the cap floor because with the cap going up so much, that means the floor goes up. Some teams don't want to spend that high. So getting a contract like his where they don't even really need to fully pay him per se, but he's on the books, it's different. It allows them to kind of artificially get to the floor. So if they reduce their cap by trading the contract, there is advantages that way because then if you're under the cap and you can manage things better, you can accrue more cap space as the season goes along, and you'd have a bigger deadline option. Now you can, if you decide not to move it, operate in LTIR all year. It's just, from an accounting standpoint, a lot more complicated. There is more advantages to not be an LTIR. So obviously, trading Carey Price's contract is a real possibility we might see for the Canadiens this year. I wonder if they want to add a top 4 defenseman if they can with the retirement of Savard. They have lots of youth in the organization who could take a spot and elevate their game, but do they want to, again, take the pressure off? Do they want to make sure they get in the playoffs again? Do they have an opportunity? There's not a ton out there in free agency, so it's kind of hard to say. Like I said before, the Lane Hudson extension is going to be huge this year. They do have back-to-back picks in the first round of the 25 draft, 16 and 17. They get the Flames pick from the Monahan deal a couple years back. So, I think it's a real possibility that those are some of the assets that they use to try to go after a number 2 centerman or a top 4 defenseman. I think at least one, maybe both of those picks would not be surprising at all if they're used as trade assets to acquire the other things that we're talking about. So overall, we've seen big things. Marty St. Louis up for Coach of the Year as well. So they have lots to build on there, and they have lots more prospects still coming. That's why I think it wouldn't be shocking to see Montreal take some of their draft capital and some of their prospects that are not yet in the organization or not on the NHL roster at least, and use them to acquire the couple of what they feel are missing pieces. And I do wonder about the future of Patrick Laine. It's a good possibility that nothing happens with Laine and he stays. But as we've seen, there are times that his game can be frustrating as much as it can be productive. And that second line for me I think it's a critical for them taking a step next year. So not only do they need to find that number 2 center, but you want to gear that number 2 center towards being a good fit for Ivan Demidov. Ideally, if you can leave Caulfield and Slafkovsky with Suzuki, then you have a first line that's going to consistently work together. You need to build a second one. Sometimes those parts can be intermixed and swapped, but you need a center that can ideally work with Demidov. He's your long-term asset, right? So you want to gear things towards him. Laine and Demidov didn't really work in the brief sample size we saw at the end of the year in the playoffs. So I don't know if Laine is really going to be the greatest fit on that line. So if he's not really a bottom six guy either. You already have shooting threats on the power play like a Caulfield. Does it make sense for the specialty that Laine offers you? Does it make sense to have that cap hit on your books that also brings with it some frustration with sometimes he's lazy, sometimes the back checking and the defensive side, not good. Like you have to put up with stuff to get the things you like. And you have to question yourself, is it worth it? And is he a fit with how this team is kind of being shaped for the future? And I have question marks over that. I'm not so sure. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Obviously, he's got 1 year left before he's a free agent. If he doesn't get moved and he does stay in Montreal this year, we'll have a chance to really get a better feel for the fit. And if things are still trending in the same way, wouldn't be surprising if he did move on to another team yet again. But let me know your thoughts and expectations for the Montreal Canadiens for the 25 offseason. There's lots of big decisions to come. Let me know what you think they're going to do, who they'll target, and how things will go. In the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.